Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Call to order the special meeting of the Littleton City Council on April 30th. Roll call.
Mayor Brinkman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman?
Here.
Councilmember Beckman?
Here.
Councilmember Cole? Here. Councilmember Taylor?
Present.
Councilmember Shenanik?
Present.
Councilmember Valdez?
Here.
Okay, great. So this evening we'll be interviewing 3 potential associate judge candidates. I'm going to ask Judge Feldman to come in briefly, and then we'll have the first candidate come in, and we've got about 20 minutes for the interview. I've got the questions here. I'll go ahead and ask the questions, and then when we're done with the questions, then I'll open it up to council questions. We have our 6 pre-designed questions. Okay, so let me go see if, I'm going to see if Judge Feldman wants to say anything, and if he doesn't, we'll bring in the, No, sorry. I think they're on one of the emails we got. Judge, did you want to say something in the beginning?
Yeah, we actually wanted a sound check and to see if there's an appropriate bright light on the candidate, so.
Okay. I know I'm going to give somewhat of a report a little bit later on, but before the interviews, if you had any questions of me or anything, I'd be glad to answer those.
I don't think
their
so.
resumes and
They're all here.
Okay. Well, we're going to go through the questions that we had worked on, and Judge added some of his comments and has seen the questions and has blessed them. So I'll just go ahead and run through those questions, and then when we've completed that, if we've got time with the 20 minutes, then council will add additional questions to the candidates. Okay?
Okay.
Bruce?
Judge, I was just going to ask you, your personal history or professional history with these folks, just maybe can you brief us on your experience with them?
Sure. Let's see, Tracy Dawson, I've known for so long, I don't remember how long I've known her. She's been a lawyer that ran into in courts all the time, and I think I even had some cases against her when I was a DA or maybe in private practice. She appeared in front of me when she was practicing law. And of course, she was associate judge in Inglewood for a long time. And I've just known her through bar association activities, just known her, can't even remember how long, I'm sure it's 30 years. And always been a wonderful experience with her. Steve Katzman, I've known, again, at least 30 years. He practiced in front of me a lot, and then we also had some cases against each other, and very active, both of us very active in the Bar Association. So I know him quite well. And then Ben Currier, I knew him from the very beginning of his legal career. He began his legal career when I was already on the bench in county court. And he started with the Miller and Steyert law firm just up the street at 1901 West Littleton Boulevard, and that's where he still is. But he was clearly a star from the very beginning for the legal profession. He was, in fact, the Arapahoe Bar Association's Young Lawyer of the Year a number of years ago. It's called the Tommy Drinkwine Award. Tommy Drinkwine was 32 years old, I think, when he died of a heart attack walking back from court. But he was a great lawyer, a great young man, and Ben has upheld that tradition well. And Ben's appeared in front of me a lot of times, and always been well prepared, very professional. Just a very, very even-tempered person, very even keel, good perspective, very mature for a lawyer who. Well, I guess 10 years, I think, is what he's been doing. I guess 10 years you'd expect a level of maturity at some point. So I have just high opinions of all 3 of these, and I've had dealings with all of them for a long time. Thank you. If that helps.
Yes. And then are you anticipating that you would like us to consider appointing all three?
Yes,
In terms
please.
of the number, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think just having 3 people available to, because who knows what scheduling is.
Okay.
Steve and Ben are very busy with their private practice. Tracy, I think, is still sitting in a few other places from time to time and has other life activities.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Do you want to be in here when we interview them? Do you? You can.
I'll defer to council on that. I can go either way on that, whatever
I'm
council.
fine with you if you're here.
I don't take it
Council?
personally either way.
Okay.
Unless you're going to give them hand signals or something like that, I think it would be fine.
Darn, you read the memo.
Thank you.
Okay. I will move over there, though.
Okay.
Where they can see the hands.
Gene will keep you under control. Hello. Good evening. Good afternoon.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Mayor.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Okay, we have 6 questions. We've got about 20 minutes, and we want to get through these 6 questions. They're fairly general, and then if we have time after that, then council may have some additional questions for you then.
All right.
The first question is, knowing that there are 3 interested parties in how processes are handled in the court, the judges, the prosecutor, and the court clerks, how would you coordinate and facilitate decisions to create consistency with the daily operations?
Decisions on the bench? Is that what you're talking about? Decisions in cases?
Decisions to create consistency with the daily operations. I think decisions in terms of how you're running the court.
All right. I think the first responsibility of a judge, especially a relief judge, is to get a flavor for the heartbeat of the court so that there's consistency when people come into the court, either as prosecutors, as witnesses, as defendants, as defense counsel, and certainly for the court clerks, because otherwise they tear their hair out. So I think that it shouldn't matter who the judge is on any particular day. There should be consistency. So the first thing I have already done and would do if I am selected to serve is learn the procedures and learn the norms and the values of the court so that I am able to just pick up in a seamless way when Judge Feldman is not sitting and run the court in a smooth and organized and efficient fashion so that it doesn't look like there's somebody that doesn't know what she's doing when she's up there in the bench.
Great, thanks. Give us an example of a goal that you set for yourself and the steps that you took to achieve it.
I set a goal of being a female judge at a time when it was not very common, and to be a female judge who was a judge and not viewed as female as opposed to male. I took it as a goal to learn the municipal way, and I have been successful in doing that for the last 27 years. I've been a judge in Inglewood for 20 years. I was the chief judge in Bennett for a year and a half. I've been a judge in Aurora now for almost 11 years. I've been a judge in Wheat Ridge for several years. I'm a judge in Lakewood. So I have made it a goal to learn the municipal way. I don't have any goal to be in any higher court because I enjoy working with common people in everyday problems. When you think about it in municipal court, you get people that deal with problems that we all could have, whether it be traffic or barking dog or zoning or domestic violence or crimes against themselves or crimes that they've committed or crimes that their children are involved with. You get the real stuff of people's lives in municipal court. And I made it a goal to make sure that I stayed in touch with that population and that demographic, and that I would be efficient and effective wherever I was.
Great. Why would you be an effective associate judge?
I think I'd be an effective associate judge because I'm very experienced, for one thing. I can sit in any municipal court, I think, effectively and competently. I also don't have an ego involved in sitting as a relief judge. I know that my role is to back up the chief judge and, as I said, to be consistent with his or her policies and practices so that it's seamless. I'm efficient, I'm punctual, I handle a large volume of cases in the jurisdictions that I sit in on time and with respect, I think, for the litigants that come in front of me. And that involves police officers and lawyers and interpreters, defendants. I think the respect part is so important because for most people, the municipal court is the justice system to them, besides what they see on TV. If I had $1 for every person that asked me if I was Judge Judy, and I was like, no, I'm not, and never want to be. But that's where people come in and see the justice system. And so I represent that, and I want to represent that well.
Great. If you were to ask the judicial community to describe you, what qualities and characteristics would they attribute to you?
Mayor, I think the overall reputation I have is one of having high integrity. And I think that's how I would be described. I think I would be described as collegial, easy to work with, someone who respects the court clerks and the staff. I respect police officers, and I respect defendants. For the most part, I get along great with other attorneys. I really have not ever had any problems dealing with other attorneys or dealing with judges in all the levels, all the way up to the Supreme Court of Colorado, all the way down to municipal court and courts not of record. So I think integrity would be the first one, and collegiality after that.
Okay. Other than making rulings on the bench, what role do you believe an associate judge would play in respect to the overall community?
I think when you're a judge, you are never not in the public eye. I think it's irresponsible, for instance, for a judge to be at parties and to be using alcohol, certainly to obey the laws and to obey the traffic laws, to be a good neighbor, and I think to be a community resource. I think one of the things that I have done in this specialized niche of being a relief judge and kind of a circuit rider is to be available and to be a consistent voice and face out in the community. So I think you're always on. There's always a possibility that someone's going to recognize you. I had a situation, in fact, the other day at an Atlanta bread company where I had traffic court that morning, and a young man who was working there came up and said, I know you, you're Judge Dawson, you had me in court this morning. And I remembered his last name because it's the same as a movie actor. And his last name was Bronson. And I said, Mr. Bronson, how are you? And he said, you were so nice to me. I'm so happy because I want to go do this with my life. And so here I was just having my lunch, and I had an opportunity to make another positive impression on a young man. And I think that's an important part of being a judge.
And how would you balance the goal of equal treatment within existing policies with the desirability of evaluating each case individually?
Well, I think consistency is very important, but discretion is equally important. Otherwise, there's no reason to have a person sitting up there. For the most part, the City Council has structured fine schedules and procedures and policies, and those should be followed. and those should be respected. But there's always that case, and there's always that fact situation that makes you stop and pause and recognize within yourself as a judicial officer that you need to spend more time on this one. You need to make an impression on a young driver. You need to spend more time with an elderly driver whose time to stop driving is upon them. And so there are those circumstances where you've just got to go beyond the fine schedule, you've got to go beyond the procedures, and really communicate one-on-one.
Great. Well, those are the 6 questions. So, council, any other additional questions? Bruce?
I'm just going to ask if, do you have any, from a scheduling perspective, do you have any minimum requirements, any conflicts? Are you flexible in terms of how you get scheduled as a relief? Do you have any issues with scheduling?
I am flexible. I gave up my litigation practice for the most part in 2008. So all I do is the relief judging. Most of the places that I serve schedule me in advance, but I'm also available for on-call. Here, I'm actually available more than anywhere else because I live closest to here. And I've kind of structured my life now so that to be a circuit rider, as I call it, I have to be available around. So I've talked to Judge Feldman about that and know what his needs would be primarily for backup. And those are easy for me because I can schedule my time as I need to.
Okay, thank you.
Bill and Peggy.
Yes, Judge Dawson used some neat terms of art. Heartbeat of the court, municipal way, and you did talk about the importance of consistency with the chief judge. You've been in the community, or broader community, I'll put it that way. What do you consider as kind of the reputation of Littleton, and what might you comment about the heartbeat that might exist in the court here?
I have on occasion practiced in the Littleton court when I was sitting very, very rarely as a judge. On occasion I would come in here. But once I got to be sitting more, then I wasn't allowed, and it wasn't a good practice to come into municipal court. However, I have a lot of friends in the legal community that have been judges here, like Don Knight and Dottie Tomasetti. Steve Katzman and I have been friends for a long time, and colleagues. And so I've had a lot of experience with them. I think the Littleton court is viewed as a moderate court, a court, in my experience, where you could come in, get your case heard, go out, where the city attorney was pretty good about working with you and the judges were good about working with you. The heartbeat of this community, I think, is one where there aren't a lot of huge major problems. There's a lot of traffic problems, as we know, and there's a lot of, there's just more pressure on society in general because of more people moving into the area, and Littleton is just bigger and bigger and bigger, and Littleton's reach is now bigger and bigger and bigger. When I started practicing law in 1983, this was just a little tiny community, and now it's, a city. And but I think it has a good reputation within the metro area. I want to sit in this city because I like this city. I respect Littleton. I've lived here in the Littleton area and in the Inglewood area for almost 30 years now. And I'm a Denver kid, so I only went away for college and law school. So I'm tied in here.
What's the most important attribute of a municipal judge?
Accessibility. I think it's very important that the people that appear in front of you feel like they got a fair shake, that they got heard, that they didn't have their time wasted, and that they weren't just a number, that they did come in, and maybe they're not happy. I mean, no one's happy if they get a ticket, but I hope they leave saying, that judge was all right. That judge was fair with me. That judge listened to what I had to say. The court clerks were nice and friendly to me, and I got in and out, and I didn't have to take a full day off from work to do it. So accessibility, I think, is the best. If you're up there and you are in your own world and your ego is the most important thing, and all you can think to do is yell at people and shout them down and castigate them. I think that's not the way of a municipal judge. I don't think that's the way of any judge. Like I said, I'm not Judge Judy, and I pride myself on it. I learned from one of the best female judges how to be effective without being that way. And I try to teach other young judges how to be that way and model for them consistency and judicial demeanor. In fact, I've taught a course to the Supreme Court judges and the appellate court judges that I designed about compassion from the bench, presence and patience. And that's what I try to model.
Peggy?
Yes, given all the courts that you practice in, how do you keep track of the regulations from one jurisdiction to another?
That's so simple, 2 words, court clerk. If I get confused, I ask my clerk, and I believe I'm in a team with the clerk, and they're always very good about telling me, what I always ask before I go. Now let's see, the court costs here are $35, but the basic way of assessing a case and assessing a fine is pretty much the same, and there's always little cheat sheets up there. It actually works fine. If you're nice to the clerks, then they'll bend over backwards for you anyway, and they'll make you look really good. So it's the court clerks that make you look good.
Council, any other questions? Okay, great. Tracy, any questions for us?
No, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
By the way, I loved your little infomercial.
Did you
the
see it?
Alamo. Yeah, I think it's hilarious. I think it's neat that you did that. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Tracy.
You'll just sit right down here.
Hi, Ben.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We have 6 standard questions that we want to ask you.
Okay.
So we'll ask those questions. We've got about 20 minutes. And once we're through those questions, then council may have some additional questions for you, okay? The first question is, knowing that there are 3 interested parties in how processes are handled in the courts, the judges, the prosecutor, and the clerks, how would you coordinate and facilitate decisions to create consistency with the daily operations?
So I think in order to create consistency, obviously I would have to start with Judge Feldman as far as making decisions, starting from him and then working down from there. But I think realistically, I've been fortunate enough to see a lot of the changes that have come into that court over time with Ms. McCarthy and the clerk and the judicial side of it. And I think realistically there's a bunch of really wonderful people over there who are all really caring about Littleton. I think their voices are important. And I think while the judges may, or the decisions may ultimately stem initially from Judge Feldman, I think involving the other players would be critical. I think getting some feedback, having everybody feel like they're participating and actually participating and then making a decision from there, I think would maybe the best choices. It's difficult just because of the different interests that go on there. But I really think communication and allowing everyone to be able to participate is the first step, and then carrying it forwards. And then after that, I think actually execution of whatever the changes may be is always the hard part. Having relatively recently become a part of the management of my firm, execution always becomes the hardest part, even though everybody has great ideas. So I think that's the next step, be to make sure that there are good people actually executing and carrying forwards, and then also then at the end of whatever decisions are being made, following back up and saying, how are these things working, and continue to reevaluate.
Right. Give us an example of a goal that you set for yourself and the steps that you took to achieve it.
Well, one of the goals, as I just mentioned, was wanting to be a shareholder in the firm. I ended up being lucky enough to start as an intern in my firm and then get hired as a law clerk and then become an associate. And I wanted to continue to be a part of the firm. I loved the other attorneys that I was working with. I loved the people, the work that we were doing, and obviously wanted to make it a goal to become a bigger piece of the firm. And the steps are tough. Obviously, in evaluating what to do, hard work, good communication, like I had already said, makes a difference, but also candidly being able to sit down and have a conversation with the powers that be and say, this is what I want, how do I get there, and then working within, kind of that structure. I feel like for me, just good hard work and trying to be the best attorney or the best whatever I am made a difference. Another goal was to be a part of with the Arapahoe County Bar Association, to be a part of the board and also to be a part of the executive membership. Same thing, sort of communicating my goal first and then putting in hard work and really continuing to try and strive to achieve it.
Okay. Why would you be an effective associate judge?
I think I would be an effective associate judge because, being able to see things maybe from a perspective of a younger attorney, someone who's in the community that may be a little bit younger, I think gives me a different perspective on how some of the problems are going on in the community, how to deal with maybe some of the individuals that come before the court, being able to deal with the community, being able to put a younger face, I think, is helpful. I also think that I would be effective because part of my practice is in criminal defense, so it gives me a good insight into dealing with criminal cases, the process, the procedures, how courtrooms work, the role of a judge.
Okay. If we were to ask the judicial community to describe you, what qualities and characteristics would they attribute to you?
I would say qualities and characteristics would be, one of the things that I keep mentioning is hard work. The other one is, honesty, being able to execute on goals that I have, on plans that get devised. I think that it's hard to kind of quantify yourself from the outside and say, what would people say about you? But I think just really being not only easy to work with, but also just very dedicated and caring about the practice that I'm in, the work that I do, the clients that I have, the people that I'm genuinely involved with, I think is what people would say.
Okay. Other than making rulings on the bench, what role do you believe the associate judge plays in respect to the overall community?
So I think one of the other roles that an associate judge, obviously second to obviously Judge Feldman, would be to also be a face for the city, quite frankly. Unfortunately, many people's major or only experience with the city may be through the court system, whether that be a traffic ticket or a dog-at-large ticket or something along those lines. They don't, unfortunately, get to sit into council chambers and meet the people who are making decisions, but get to experience, Littleton through the judicial process. And I think being a good face, a good representative of Littleton is really important. And I also think that one of the other jobs is to help assist in making sure that, for lack of a better term, justice sort of gets done, whether that be through, warrants that have to get issued, defendants that appear, managing the courthouse, sort of the judicial branch, making sure that all of those things get accomplished.
Great. How would you balance the goal of equal treatment within the existing policies with the desirability of evaluating each case individually?
I That's tough. That's every judge's question whenever they have to look at cases. I think probably setting some kind of a baseline or having some sort of a ground floor in which to start from makes sense. And I know that having a certain bracket or parameters to work within is what a lot of people do and say, okay, my discretion lies between X and Y. I think that being able to say that for all cases of a certain category, start here, and then being able to make some individual determinations is what you have to do. Frankly, I think that being able to make some type of an independent review of cases is important, because not everybody is the same that comes forward. They may all be charged with the same charge, but each person's circumstances are completely different. And I think that the court has to take those into consideration in making a sentence. The other thing that we consider, and I know in my practice as partly as a defense attorney, is that a 6-foot pool to a 3-foot man is not the same as a 6-foot pool to a 6-foot, 5-foot man. Obviously, the difference is that your circumstances change, that, yeah, the punishment's all the same, but your circumstances are so different. And I think you really have to sort of be able to evaluate these circumstances and situations, and frankly, I think it comes down to trying to do the best you can and what's right.
Great, thank you. Counsel, additional questions? Bruce?
Ben, I was just going to ask, from a scheduling standpoint,
Sure.
do you have any minimum requirements in terms of filling in as a relief judge? Do you have any, what level of flexibility do you have?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about your needs as far as being assigned.
Make sure I understand your question. Are you asking about what I plan to be scheduled, what I need to be scheduled, or what availability I have on my schedule to be scheduled?
So I guess you could go either way.
Okay.
What do you need? How much flexibility do you have, and are there minimums you would expect to be able to sit in the court?
So I don't know that I have any expectations to say that I need to sit 3 days a week or 2 days a week. Candidly, I'm thrilled to be able to A, be considered, and B, to be Judge Feldman's backup, whatever that may be. And I know that Judge Feldman plans to be full-time, whatever that may be for his schedule. And so I don't have any expectations to say that I need to be there so much. I do have flexibility in my schedule. I do plan my own schedule. I don't do any federal practice, so I don't have any judges who are saying you will be here on X date at X time, and if you can't, that's too bad. So I have some availability to be able to plan my schedule. Other than that, like I said, I would be happy to be able to participate as much or as little as the court needs and Judge Feldman needs and as you all need. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bill?
Thank you, Counselor. What do you see as your biggest challenge to move to the other side of the bench?
So, I don't know. It's a good question. I think what I try and really do is be able to put myself in the shoes of my client. And I think the hard part, and I tend to and it's a good thing to really be involved with my client, with their lives, with their positions. But at the same time, trying to take the third-party view to make sure that I'm able to be the voice of reason for my clients. And so I think the harder part is to really be able to say, that there are certain guidelines that have to be done, and to say that even though I'm thinking that there are circumstances that, require some type of new sentence or some type of leniency or increased sentence, if that's the case, candidly, it'll be an interesting experience all the way around, and to be able to put on the judicial cap, because I get the ability to argue on my client's behalf and not have to always take the middle of the road per se. So I guess probably the real way to answer that question is I don't know what the toughest thing is going to be, because I haven't sat on the other side yet. So.
And then attributes you've seen
Sure.
in judges, what do you think is the most necessary attribute for a municipal judge?
I'd have to say that one of the most important qualities would be to be to care, and it sounds kind of esoteric, but to say to care about the process, the people, the various individuals that are involved, I think is probably one of the most important things. I see judges who genuinely really are caring for the defendant that appears before them, for the individual that appears before them, for the prosecutor in their courtroom, for the defense attorneys, good, bad, or indifferent, that appear before them. And I think it makes a real difference for the court and quite frankly, the process when you have a judge that cares about what goes on in the courtroom. And if I can throw in a second, I would say to make sure that judges realize that they're people too. I think that makes a huge difference when you have judges who realize that they're individuals, that they may be sitting behind a bench, but they also have their own issues, and that people coming before them are people also. So,
Any other questions? Great. That's it.
great.
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much.
Thank you
Great
to
to
you
meet
all.
you.
Great to meet you too.
What impressed me first? Like that.
That was only because I was thinking about you, Jerry. It's all about you.
As soon as he said it, you were like,
I wanted to make sure you didn't miss it. You might have been sleeping.
good evening.
Hello.
Hello, Judge.
Good to see all of you. Thank you.
So Steve, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Good,
How is everybody?
good. We'll start off, I've got 6 kind of standard questions I want to go through,
Okay.
and we've got about 20 minutes, so once we get through those, then council will have some additional questions for you.
Okay, and there's one thing I wanted to bring up. I don't know if now would be the appropriate time or after your question, so.
You can go ahead.
Okay. I've mentioned this to Judge Feldman just in the spirit of full disclosure. I had or am starting to go through a situation which just came up on Saturday with some litigation that I'm going to be involved in involving the estate of a former partner. So I just wanted to, it's only financial and involves some of the finances with my joining the firm that I'm with now, but I wanted you to be aware of that. So at this point, we haven't been able to settle things, and it's gone into litigation.
What a surprise for attorneys.
It's unfortunate, but I thought, and I advised Judge Feldman of that yesterday, and we talked about it, and we thought it would be appropriate to let you guys know so that there aren't any secrets.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so for a dummy here, would you translate that? Does that mean?
I'm being sued.
Okay. I could think of several possibilities, and I thought, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, and I don't know that it's appropriate for me to go into the details, but the bottom line.
That's okay, thank you. I didn't mean to do that to you.
No. If I was talking in too much lawyerese, that's the best way of phrasing it.
Judge, I was just going to ask sort of as a follow-on, you don't anticipate any conflicts with regard to scheduling sitting on our bench?
No.
Okay, and then presumably if any conflict arose with anything that might come before you, you would have to recuse, and you're...
Oh,
I
absolutely.
can't imagine how that would happen, but...
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, we'll get started. Knowing that there are 3 interested parties in how processes are handled in the court, the judges, the prosecutors, and the court clerks, how would you coordinate and facilitate decisions to create consistency with the daily operations?
Well, I think there are more interested parties than just the three that you've named, Mayor. I think you also have the victims that are involved. There's also the defendant and occasionally defense counsel. I think that we have, over the last few years, developed some pretty good procedures in terms of how things are scheduled. I think that has helped in streamlining the court. I like the procedure that was developed a couple of years ago of having our general ordinance violations appearances scheduled at a certain time, and also then the traffic cases at a different time. So I think that tends to flow. Obviously, you've got to be aware of one of the difficulties of what we do is that, especially for people that are in the court all the time, is that you're sitting around quite a bit, so people need breaks. That becomes a little bit of a conflict because, and one of the things I've always been concerned about is that when we've got a busy docket, I always feel bad for the person that is the last one to get called. And there's obviously somebody that's going to get in early, and there's somebody that's going to be there for 2 hours at the end of the docket. So you have to try and be sensitive to that, figure out what things can be done quickly so people can go about their schedules and what things are going to take a longer time, and you need to perhaps put them at the end of the docket.
Okay. Give us an example of a goal that you set for yourself and the steps you took to achieve it.
I guess that would be when, unfortunately, I got divorced, and I had 2 young children, and my goal was to be the best father that I could. I think I've been pretty successful. I'm pretty proud of my kids. My daughter just graduated from college last spring. She's now working up in Steamboat. My son is an aspiring journalist up at the University of Oregon. And what I wound up doing was making sure that their needs came first, making sure that my schedule fit around theirs. I very rarely missed one of their games or performances or things like that. That was a commitment that I made. I'm very proud to have been able to fulfill that.
Why would you be an effective associate judge?
Well, at this point, I think I'm the last guy standing and the one with the most experience. I think that's been of help to Judge Feldman. There have been a couple of transitions over the last few years, and I'm a team player. I'm someone that I think I'm good at what I do. I was the president of our state Colorado Municipal Judges Association a couple of years ago, so I think I have the respect of fellow municipal judges around the state. Help train some of the newer judges. So I think those are all traits that would help me to continue doing this job.
If we were to ask the judicial community to describe you, what qualities and characteristics would they attribute to you?
I hope that I'm fair, that I'm even-handed, listen to people, and make an intelligent decision. Obviously, when you're involved in litigation, somebody is not going to be happy with the decision that you make. But I think the important thing is, which I have gone to great lengths over my judicial career, is that you have to go about explaining what you're doing, and you've got to do it in simple language, and make sure that people understand what you're doing, and hopefully how it affects them, so that they know, what's expected.
Okay. Other than making rulings on the bench, what role do you believe the associate judge plays with respect to the overall community?
Well, obviously, as a judge, you are a representative of the court, and the community, I think, looks up to judicial officers. I think we have an obligation to our fellow judges to make sure that the court is running smoothly. Up until a few years ago, there was a requirement in the charter that the judge live in the city. We don't have that any longer. I think Judge Feldman is the only one of us that actually lives in the city, although I used to live in the city during the daytime, and we still have an office here. But I think you're a visible component of the court and of the community in that way. It would be nice, although it would be difficult for me, to be able to participate in nonprofit, charitable type of community activities. I've done some of that, obviously a little less over the last few years, but I think those are important things to be visible.
Okay. How would you balance the goal of equal treatment with existing policies and the desirability of evaluating each case individually?
I look at the various policies, if you're talking about our fine schedule or things like that, which we've set out. I would say that is the norm, bless you, that we should generally follow those, but we're not machines as judges, so we have to take into account everybody's individual circumstances. And if, for example, if you've got an older person who is in front of you on their first traffic ticket in 50 years, I think that's an appropriate case to deviate from our fine schedule. So I would look at the policies that we've put in place. Yes, that's important because from judge to judge, whether it's Judge Feldman or any of the other three or the other two judges, we all have to basically follow a similar pattern so that there's fairness, and you don't want to have people shopping so that everybody comes in because there's a particular judge that has a reputation for being a softie. That's not good. So you have to make sure that everyone is following a general set of procedures, but you also have to be able to take into account the individual circumstances that come before you. So it's a balancing.
Okay, great. There's our 6 questions. Counsel, any additional questions? Bill?
Judge, one of the things one of the other relief judge candidates had mentioned is staying attuned to the heartbeat of the court as it would exist here in Littleton. You've been here. How might you describe the heartbeat of Littleton's courts?
I think the heartbeat now is pretty sound. I think Judge Feldman is an excellent choice. He is going to provide tremendous leadership for the court. There have been some challenges for the last couple of years. I think in some ways we've come through it for the better. I think the procedures that were put in place a couple of years ago in terms of bringing up to date our fine schedule, bond schedule, and some of the other procedures, there were some things that we were doing that were not good. But I think we're past that, and I'd like to look forward. I think that if the 4 of us have the opportunity to serve on the bench here, we will have an extremely collegial court, a cooperative court, a court that I think will make all of you and the rest of the community very proud.
And what would you, past president of the Municipal Judge Association, so I realize I'm going to take a lot from this, is recognizing that often the municipal court is sometimes the only face of municipal government that folks might see. What do you consider to be the most essential attribute of a municipal judge?
Well, and I think Judge Feldman can speak to this probably a little better than I can, but the average citizen, if they're going to come into contact with the court, is going to be either through the municipal court or the county court because of the type of cases that we deal with. We're dealing primarily with traffic cases. You also have low-level criminal matters. So I think the most important thing is that it's got to be a fair process, and people have to feel like they've been heard and they've been respected. That can be difficult because, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to balance having a 7 or 8 page docket with 60 people in front of you. As I said, somebody gets to go first, and unfortunately somebody's last. and you have to try and make sure that that person doesn't feel like they've had their time wasted if they've had to sit and listen to me basically do the same advisement for 2.5 hours. Okay, you know, that's difficult. Sometimes, and one of the things I try to do because of the type of stuff that we deal with at the municipal court level is I try not to take things too seriously, and I think it helps to do some humor. So occasionally what I've done with the last person is ask, you know, you want to switch places and you can do the advisement, because after they've heard it for that many times, hopefully, you know, they pretty much know what to say. So I think it helps. We're human, and we can't take ourselves too seriously. And I think that the most important thing is to make sure that people feel that it's been a positive session where they've been respected and heard.
Bruce?
Judge, just a couple questions. Actually, before I do that, just based on something you just said, quick, when people show up and there's 60 people on a docket, do they know, does the last person on the docket know they're going to be last? Is there any way to tell them you're not going to be up for 2 hours?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I've often wondered, although I haven't talked to Judge Feldman about this or any of the other presiding judges I've worked with, is if there's a way where you can sort of have like the little, you know, now serving.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's going to work. And I think in many ways, and I've not really sat down with the staff to figure out how it's done, whether it's who checks in first. I think in some situations, for example, if we've had something real quick where we knew that someone wasn't going to enter a plea, that they were setting their case for trial or setting it over, hopefully those have been pulled out either and flagged by the city attorney or the bailiff so that those folks can go first. We can get them out because it's only going to take 30 seconds to deal with them with my time. Where with someone with a plea, we have certain procedures that we've got to go through and certain things that we have to hit. That will take a little longer. Sometimes, for example, you know, the real joy is when the police have busted some MIP party and you've got 40 kids in your court, all from the same incident. And they all have the same disposition. So sometimes what I've tried to do is bring them all up at the same time to try and cut down on some of the repetition. So instead of saying the same thing 20 times, I'm only doing it maybe 4 or 5 times. But to answer your question directly, I don't know that there's a way where you can tell somebody, unfortunately, you're going to be the last person here, and it's going to be a couple hours. But, you know, I think the thing is, most of the time, I'm not taking a break when I'm doing an advisement session. Generally, the only time I will take a break is if we've got the jail calling and we've got prisoners. And normally what I'll tell people that are in the audience is, you know, I'm taking a break here. You guys can break as well, but I'm not going off and having a smoke somewhere or having a cup of coffee. I'm going to be doing something. This is what I'm going to be doing. You need to know that so that you don't feel like your time is being wasted. It's really just, it's a matter of communication.
Okay. All right. Good. And the other question is, do you have any minimum scheduling requirements as far as how many times you would sit a week or a month? And then the other side of that coin is, how flexible are you in terms of when the scheduling could occur?
The way things have worked over the last couple of years, the scheduling has not been a problem. And basically what happened is Judge Anderson, as presiding judge, got first dibs. Judge Julie Anderson had the second crack at the schedule, and then basically I had what was left over. I don't think that we ever had a situation over the last couple of years where someone got sick at the last minute and we needed to fill in that morning. There had been some things that had come up where I had a day or two notice, and I was always able to work around that. Obviously, if I've got a trial or something in my private practice, that's going to be a problem, but I think we've got enough coverage. So to answer your question, I don't think scheduling would be a difficulty. In fact, there was one situation about a year ago where we had some snafu with a schedule, and who was supposed to be there didn't show up, and I wound up covering at the very last minute. Actually, I walked into the courthouse to take care of something else and got, can you stay for an hour? We've got some things where we need some help, and that's my job, is to fill in. I think the scheduling is something that all of us can work out with the presiding judge. I don't have any minimum requirements. I know that at this point with Judge Feldman that hopefully his health will be good, but I also hope he'll be taking vacations occasionally as well. So that's probably in all likelihood how the rest of us will get our time.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Peggy?
So is there a question you think we should have asked and didn't? And if so, what is it?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I've enjoyed my 30-year association. I haven't been on the bench that long, but I've been a practicing attorney with an office here in Littleton since 1982. I think it's a wonderful community. I think it's a good court. I think it's a court that the citizens can be very proud of, and I think we do a good job. So I'd like the opportunity to continue doing that.
Well, you've definitely been around with us for a while. What made you decide that you wanted to come back again?
Well, I didn't want to leave in the first place. But I think the opportunity to work with Judge Feldman, I've known Ethan from the time that I first came to Littleton back in 1982. And I was somewhat of a new attorney and had the good fortune of coming into a good situation, moving into the building that Judge Ney owned. There's obviously something in the air because I think everybody that's been in that building served on the bench in one level or another over the years. And after I moved in 1982, Judge Ney and Judge Leopold made it a point for me to meet the people that were in the Miller building, which is where Judge Feldman was, and the other attorneys that were in town. And I've had a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for Judge Feldman over the years. I'm very honored that he asked you to consider my appointment for this position.
Great. Okay. I think that's it. Thanks, Steve.
Very good.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Judge, you want to come up?
Debbie,
Jim?
before he starts, can I ask a couple of questions? You listen to all the interviews, and I know we've had this discussion about the bench book before. Is that going to give consistency to the associates to follow something like that?
I think it does, and I've gone through the bench book many times now, and I'm finding it very, very helpful. I'm also finding things that maybe bear some further discussion. I think I told you at the very beginning that I'm not one to come in and say, okay, everything's all messed up here, I'm going to change everything. I'm learning things day by day, and things come up where I say, maybe we could tweak this a little bit, but then I ask other people, am I missing something here? And sometimes I have been missing something. For instance, Rochelle will always set me straight on things that where I have an interpretation of something.
The other thing I had was something that Steve Katzman said that struck a chord, that an older driver comes in that hasn't had a ticket for 50 years. How do you know he hasn't had a ticket for 50 years? You got to take his word for it?
Well, we have a traffic history, certainly, which the urban legend is they go back maybe 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And then you just have to sometimes figure, does this person look like someone who's going to try to scam you or not? And
I'm just curious, because I didn't figure you had 50-year records.
Yeah, it is mainly them telling you that, and frequently they come in with their daughter, their son, their granddaughter, grandson, and you get a little bit of additional information. You certainly have to take things on faith from time to time.
Thank you.
But I like to think that people are honest.
Okay. Any other questions? Bill?
Judge, in having listened to the candidates, you're still as supportive as you were. None of them seemed to stumble, but you might have caught something different.
No, I think I was very pleased to what they had to say, and they certainly answered questions, some of the questions differently amongst themselves, which is good. I think it shows they have a different perspective and different things to contribute to the court. I know we have quarterly judicial team meetings scheduled, but I'm definitely going to have lunch meetings occasionally with all four of us whenever we can get together, just to talk about how things are going, talk about ideas, and certainly I know that they won't be too shy in letting me and the court staff know if they have some thoughts about some particular things. So I was happy to hear some diversity in the answers, but I think the baseline, the core of what they were saying was good. It was what I expected they would say. I think they're all very caring. They understand that it's a huge responsibility to be the face of the community for a lot of people.
Great. Okay. So you have an update and a presentation?
Just a small update of things.
Okay.
I'm still learning my way somewhat.
That's fine. Well, it's a good opportunity for you to kind of give us
Right.
a touch point, and then if there's some additional information that's forthcoming, or if council would like to see some additional information, we can kind of have that conversation too.
I mean, we certainly can look at things statistically, and I printed out these statistics, and as I look at them, they're kind of microscopic, but I'd be glad to share them. Did you print them out less microscopically? Thank you. Yeah, that was exactly what I was trying to do.
Efficient court clerk you got there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's start with Peggy here. Now, statistics, of course, are not particularly dispositive of anything. They can sort of, if there's something way out of whack, you'll see it. I think what it shows is it's reflective in many ways of the growth of the city. The general plane of tickets is upward. There's been some dips and peaks here and there. And some of it, of course, the court gets the number of tickets based on how the police are writing the tickets to some degree. I know they've got plenty of business that could generate a lot more tickets, and they use discretion. I see a friendly nod. But there are some types of cases where the police get they get to write tickets and arrest people without being proactive even, because I'm seeing tons of shoplifting cases from King Soopers, seeing a lot of domestic violence cases, and a lot of traffic, and so it is reflective of a growing community, and it's also somewhat reflective of the demographic changes in the community. While certainly there's, and this is more in your arena certainly, there's a lot of prosperity in our community, but there's also some people who are in situations where they sometimes resort to activities that maybe aren't the social norms that we would expect, and the police do have to take those matters seriously. We do have also a lot of kids who are feeling the pressures of society, and that leads me to, and I'll get to that in a minute, but one of my main concerns has been, what are we doing with juveniles? Are we doing the right thing with kids? In fact, I'll go into that right now real quickly. It's going to be maybe a longer-term project to talk about what we do with kids. The first thing about dealing with kids is they have to be held accountable for their behavior or their misbehavior. The question is, what's the most effective way of holding them accountable? And are we the court that is best for holding kids accountable in certain circumstances? Certainly when they get traffic tickets, when they get their first MIP ticket, I think we're a good court because we've got good things designed. The Littleton Police Defensive Driving class is excellent. We get good feedback from that. It's not only good in the sense of they learn some things, but they also have some interaction with some of the local police officers, and that's a very good thing. The MIPs, one of the things they do is they go to Darrell Sloan's class. It's one of the resources we use anyway, and then they do some community service. So in some of the I guess less serious matters that we have to still take seriously, we're doing pretty well, I think. But then we also we're seeing some kids with just tremendous needs, kids who have been in and out of foster homes, and they're there with a single parent who's pulling their hair out almost literally while they're standing at the podium with the kid. And some of these kids are they're like this tall, and you're saying, my God, what's going to happen to this kid in the next few years? And am I equipped to help the kid go in the right direction? And I don't know the answers. I do know that the state court, the state juvenile court, does the best they can do, but they have to do sort of a triage too. The district attorney has to decide what cases are going to be filed, and the juvenile court itself has to decide what cases are going to be handled at what level of seriousness. And there's a lot of kids who fall right kind of in between typical teenager stuff of squealing their tires and going to a party and having a beer, and kids who are habitually smoking marijuana, or kids who are doing who are doing really worse things. And there are kids in between that I hope we're doing the right thing with, and I'm going to try to talk to people. I talked to, and Bruce Beckman knows the Reverend Jeff Kane, who runs a wonderful program over at the First Presbyterian Church, and he brings kids in. It's not a religious program, it just happens to be geographically located there, and he happens to have an REV in front of his name. But we had a long talk, and I'm going to be sending kids to him. It's more of a socialization, and I don't mean by party socialization. It's more of he helps kids learn to interact with each other, interact with adults, talks to them about taking responsibility for their actions, but also giving them some positive reinforcement and seeing what needs do you have in your life, what can we do for you too, what can we help you do for yourself. There's another program called The Compound, starts with a K. I'm sure you're aware of that, run by a former deputy sheriff who was a school resource officer and a person of wonderful reputation. And we send kids there too, but there's a limit to what we can do, and part of the problem is that in terms of telling kids what we expect from them, we don't have a lot of hammers here. If they're in juvenile court, the hammer is they can go to the Department of Institutions for a period of time. Here, if we really need to, we could send a kid to jail to the Foot Center for 2 days for contempt. But other than that, we tell them, okay, well, if you don't do this, you're going to get fined $1,000. Well, you might as well tell the kid it's $1 million, because it means the same thing to them. We'll tell them you have to do 24 hours of community service. Well, the problem is they haven't done their 8 hours of community service. How do we expect them to do their 24? So these are the sorts of problems sorts of issues I'm trying to address. I'm talking to judges in other municipalities to get a handle on how they address these issues, what types of kids they have to deal with. Just to be anecdotal, there's two young women who are, I think, are 16 years old, go to one of the local high schools here, habitually in trouble for shoplifting. They're really tight, close friends. They're really their only friends of each other. The home situations are not good. Parents are working as hard as they can on it, the single parents. But one of the things one of the conditions of their probation was that they can't hang out with each other because they're bad influence. That's what the city attorney recommended, and I don't criticize that. But then I wonder, are we doing the right thing? Here they are. These are the two. Put them together, and it's gas and matches. On the other hand, if we pull them apart, these kids are also their support systems. So I'm struggling to figure out what we can do, but I'll find a way to do it better at least. But I may need ultimately some guidance from council on other options we can have with dealing with kids. Some just there's a few little things that happen, and these are more like dealing with perhaps prosecution policies. If a kid gets a conviction for a drug case, that may mess them up for getting a federally approved student loan. And that kind of goes against what we want to have happen with kids. We want them to be able to go to school and grow out of their issues. So, juveniles has been my main source of head scratching, what to do with them. And as I said, talking to Reverend Kane was very helpful to me, and just also understanding a little bit more about the dynamics of kids in this community, because he knows the kids in this community, and he knows the kids who are at risk in this community. Maybe we just need more resources, more places to send them. Peggy?
Before I forget,
Okay.
based on what you just said about the drugs and the problem, if they want to get a low federal
Right.
money to go to college,
Right.
can you do a deferred sentence? I mean, a deferred, whatever it is, deferred, so that if they don't come back before you, they don't get that, but if they come back before you, they get that plus whatever the next thing?
The city attorney does try to give kids deferreds on these, but I've anecdotally heard people still being rejected, even with a deferred, that some federal agencies look at a deferred judgment as a conviction nonetheless, because it involves a guilty plea. Now, if we get to deferred prosecution, that might be different, because that doesn't involve a guilty plea.
Okay, so I just want to be rolling around my head since you say you want to maybe talk to us about this, so
Right.
thank you.
So juveniles is one area. The video advisements, I hope I'm not going on too long here.
Okay.
Okay. I've drafted some new procedures for video advisements. I want to add some procedures where we get just more, and we haven't implemented them yet because we don't have our new video equipment yet, but I want to get some more written acknowledgments from defendants. Right now, it's basically a verbal advisement, verbal plea of guilty, verbal acknowledgement of the protection order. Then we fax it over to them afterwards, and they sign it. But I'd like to be able to even have paperwork prepared beforehand, fax it back and forth. Shouldn't be much of a challenge, but I want to make sure we're doing things in the right order, because we're going to physically relocate the video advisements within the courthouse, so that to make it more publicly accessible. Because right now the video advisements are done out of the judges' chambers, and I invite people in, but so far we've only had 2 people at most at one time want to come in to see the advisements. But it's important, I think, that it be a public procedure, which is why we're going to move them to the courtroom itself. And the city attorney will meet with the defendants by video before I do, and I'll be in chambers then, and then come out to the courtroom. We'll do the advisement and plea of guilty or whatever they're doing in the courtroom itself. But I want to know exactly how that's going to look before I do a final draft of procedures for that, and I'll do that in consultation with Rochelle and the other clerks who are going to have to implement it.
When do you expect to have the video in the courtroom?
Rochelle? Wendy, maybe?
Can you let us know when you do? Thank you. That'd be motivation. I'll come over.
Okay. That's one thing I've been working on. Fine schedules, we've been talking about that, making sure that we're covering all fines and costs and making sure that they're consistent with the city code. I've been going through the code on that to make sure, as I said, everything is consistent with that. And if need be, I'll seek additional authority or guidance from council on the schedule. One thing I've been working on that's seemingly not going to occur much, but jury instructions and procedures, because we don't have many jury trials. But one thing Rochelle pointed out to me, and she's working on it, is that we need to update the jury pool, and I don't know if you're updating the summoning procedure too?
It'll be all part of that. We actually in IS's hand now, they've got to get it uploaded into the system. We have the new people's information.
So we want to get the most representative jury pool we can get from the city, but also jury instructions. At the end of a case, after all the evidence, those of you who've been on jury duty know that the judge reads written instructions of law to the jury and then hands them to them in writing. And I'm assembling packets, standard packets that whatever judge is here can use for those, with variations depending on what offense is actually charged, and also some templates for just a few things that would need to be customized. We can't completely use the standard state jury instructions because we have different offenses and some different nomenclature also. But I've been working on updating that and assembling packets, as I said, so that we don't have long delays. Okay, well, we need this jury instruction, we need this one. The goal is to finish the trial, finish the evidence, have the jury instructions ready in 15 minutes, and then start with the final arguments and the reading of the instructions, get the jury deliberating. After all, we only allow generally one day, a Friday, for jury trials. And the jury trial might even be interrupted by a video advisement of any prisoner that we have on Friday. So that's just part of being more efficient. I'll just generally say that we're looking at how we're doing our probation procedures. We have a probation officer who started recently. Unfortunately, she's encountered some illness, but she was off to a great start, and I anticipate that when she comes back, she's going to do a great job. It was a great hire that Rochelle made, Rochelle and Wendy. I think you were in on that, weren't you? Yeah. And it was a great hire. She's shown a lot of initiative, and she and I will have an opportunity to talk about how maybe some forms need to be revised, a few procedures need to be revised, but generally, I think we're on the right path there. Also I'm looking at, are we having too many mandatory court appearances on traffic cases or not enough? I know that there's certainly something to be said for when people get a ticket, and especially if it's not their first ticket, they need to come to court. And they need to get that reinforcement of better behavior by coming to court. On the other hand, if they just pay their ticket, they'll get the full number of points, and they'll have probably, though, a lower fine because of the fine that's written on the summons. But if they come to court, even on a mandatory court appearance, unless they have a terrible record, they're going to get at least a point knocked off of their ticket, and that can be pretty important to them. They'll probably wind up with a higher fine. So in some ways, it's good to have a mandatory appearance, In other ways, it's good to just let them pay and be done with, because we may have a similar outcome no matter what, and any outcome might be more favorable to the defendant from one point of view and not from another. But I know that there is good reason to say people ought to come to court when they get a ticket if it's a serious ticket, a serious enough ticket, and they've been, it's not their first time around the block on that. So that's kind of what I've been doing. I've been mainly learning from a very talented staff, and a very good, kind staff, too, I might add. I'm amazed at how well they treat people, even though they take a lot of abuse. But they're so good at, still treating everyone like with respect and diffusing situations. And I learned from everyone there. The security guard, I learned something from him every day. He knows a lot about the culture of what's been happening over the last several years, and he just kind of, like everyone else, has a sense of when maybe we need to look at something more deeply or just be aware of someone. But the clerks themselves also are just being very patient with me as I learn more and more about things, and Rochelle's doing a wonderful job.
Well, and on that same plane, we're hearing wonderful things about you also.
Well, thank you.
And the balance that you're bringing to the court, and just glowing reviews, so we appreciate that.
I'm happy to hear that. Thank you.
Counsel, is that it?
That's
Okay.
it. I mean, I got a lot more notes, but
Any questions? Jerry?
Are the numbers represent dollars?
on the the upper part, that's dollars.
The bottom?
The bottom part is numbers of cases.
So, for instance, April 12, traffic tickets, 594. That is,
There were 594 tickets filed into the court in April of 12, right?
so some are mailed in and taken care of that
It's
way?
just filed by the police department.
Okay.
Total number of cases filed.
And of that, some will come to the court at sometime down the road?
Yeah, good portion of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill?
Two questions. I know there's lies, damn lies in statistics, but one of the numbers is trying to make sure that the court is addressing all the things that we need to have addressed, which is watching the inventory as it comes in and the inventory of those things that are disposed of in whatever way, and to make sure things don't get caught up in the system and be constipated. How are you kind of keeping a pulse on what's coming in and what's going out to make sure that stuff isn't getting caught up?
Well, the first thing, of course, is to make sure that the cases are set promptly and that they are not continued unless there's a good reason to continue it, such as someone wants to get an attorney, someone isn't sure that their driving record is correct, things like that. But we don't set things off very far in the future. I think I would just guess that 95% of the cases are resolved within about 60 days or less.
Correct.
And then, of course, the closing cases, it's easy to measure cases coming in. It's harder to measure cases going out, because what is a closure of a case? In the state court system, once someone enters a plea of guilty and is sentenced, no matter what they're sentenced to, that case is labeled closed. Here, I think we're doing a different and better way of approaching it, because we're putting people on, if we put people on probation, which the state courts do also, we're not saying the case is closed, because we are keeping our thumb on them. We're telling them, especially if they have specific requirements like community service or classes to go to, we're telling them to come back in 30, 60, 90 days. So the case is still in the court system. It's still technically there. But it's you could say, I guess, technically it's closed if you use the state court parameter, or a state court standard, but I think this is a good way of effectively using cases that are still hanging around, because we're making sure that people do what they're supposed to do.
And I know that's, you know, the intent, but to make sure that we don't have this growing volume of stuff that we have to track, how do we make sure that it stays manageable, as would be a way that I would ask the question.
Well, I think one way of making it more, of keeping track of that is that if I notice spikes in how busy we are, on Wednesday afternoon is our big afternoon, our big time. We do anywhere from 80 to 120 cases, and a lot of it depends, of course, on how many people actually show up. And I'd say a good portion of the people show. But even within that parameter, 80 to 120, I don't view that as being a huge variation. So we see that these cases come in, we know how many we're resolving, and I would say that over 90% of those cases get resolved right then and there. These are their first appearances and their last appearances in court. If I were to start seeing Wednesday afternoons, or any day, but like, for instance, Wednesday afternoons, if I was seeing 200 cases, I'd say, well, first of all, let's see, are the police being really active all of a sudden on the writing of the tickets? Or are we doing something wrong? Are we scheduling things incorrectly? But with the tickets themselves, I think we'll notice spikes. On our review day of Thursday morning to see how people are doing, if all of a sudden we're seeing a big spike of things, then I would say, why is that? If we're seeing more court trials, I'd say, why is that?
I'm open to however you want to take a look at it, but the concern is to make sure that we have kind of an idea of what's open and in process, so it's not just one of those things where they're lingering somewhere in the system. So
yeah, it's a matter of what standard we use to measure, and there are some programs like the state judicial program that we could use, where you can send inquiries into the computer and you get specific answers back. Ours doesn't have that capability. I don't know if that's a good use of money or not, but that's a council issue, I guess.
Well, I'll turn to you and say, how do we kind of keep that pulse? Yeah. Second question, over the last several months, there certainly has been the issue of how communities handle mental health. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what's going on in the courts, what you're seeing, and how that's being dealt with.
Well, again, it's the juveniles is the area where it concerns me the most. And we are seeing juveniles that I think have mental health issues. But also some of the ones with the more severe ones, and I'm saying severe in the scale of people we see, are also involved in other courts that are also having them go to different programs. And that we do have kids and adults who are on dual probation now. They're in probation through a state court, probation through our court. The city attorney will take a look at these. The city prosecutor will take a look at some of these and say, well, maybe we should just yield to the state court. Or maybe the state court is supervising this person in name only. So, but do we have the facilities to deal with people who are really severely mentally ill? I don't think so. We can certainly track them. We can try to send them to places where they'll benefit, but we don't have the structure, I think, to go that deeply into people's lives. I think we're dealing with municipal ordinance violations, which counterintuitively are sometimes symptomatic, more symptomatic than other things of mental health issues. If you got a guy who's stealing cheese from King Soopers one week and crackers the next week, and we're seeing the guy time after time after time, and you look and you talk to the guy and try to engage. I mean, you know that some of these people are quite ill, but what do we do with them? I don't want to say that jail's the answer necessarily, although sometimes jails the Arapahoe Jail is pretty good at triaging people for mental illness. But again, our prisoners are probably lower down on their priority list.
Last month, some of us were at a presentation where Grayson talked about jails now being our place for treatment for mental health. Too much.
Yeah, it's almost, I hate to use the term, but sometimes you could say it's a dumping ground. And I'm sure he feels that pressure.
Any other questions, Peggy?
What kind of pattern are you seeing, if any, in juvenile use of marijuana and selling and so forth?
Well, the sales tend to be referred to the juvenile court, the district court. So I don't see much of that, although the police officers can use their discretion, and if it's just one kid selling a joint to another kid, I think sometimes the police will just write them possession tickets. It's a discretionary thing.
Sometime last summer when I visited court, and there was maybe a sixth grader in there for distributing on behalf of some older teenagers. So you're not seeing, do you remember that? Or
I've heard about that case. In fact, I see them. I see kids just, like I said, this tall, using marijuana. I think the drug use is, I can't say whether it's up or down. I haven't been around enough to know that, but I can tell you it's there, and it's disturbing. If it's the first time they are caught, and I don't like to say first offense because I think it's more first time they're caught, we send them to a drug and alcohol class and hope that it makes some impression. But then when we see them again, then we start to worry. Tobacco is also one of the most abused substances we're seeing. I think I see almost as many tobacco cases as marijuana cases. And alcohol.
no, so how do they get there with smoking cigarettes?
From friends.
No, but how are they getting to court then?
Oh, how are they getting to court? They get a ticket for possession of tobacco.
As in, here's how naive I am. So
Okay.
I haven't smoked since I was 4. So that was once, and that was enough. So how they get ticketed if they're smoking?
They have to be,
Because,
you can't buy cigarettes under 18.
Right.
so okay.
So
Yeah.
if there's an undercover sting, then they would get a possession ticket. Or if they go to, I don't know that they really actually do this, but they could, if there's a party and there's some drinking and some smoking, they're all going to get possession tickets.
Okay.
And I think, and the chief can probably confirm this, but the police are pretty good at knowing exactly where on the school grounds the kids think they're not going to get caught, and then they get caught. Because I'd say that the majority of the tobacco cases come from the schools. Unfortunately, from the middle schools.
So it's the schools in part, too, though, that are reporting them, right?
Yeah, the schools take action too.
Okay.
The schools
'Cause I
will.
knew that part, but I,
No.
thank you.
Yeah, we see the school security officers or the quasi-security officers. Sometimes the maintenance people are quasi-security officers, and they will report to the school resource officer, and then we see them.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a great update.
I appreciate that. Appreciate all of your support. And then I should stick around for the
Yeah.
swearing in.
Well, are we,
Or I guess you have to vote first.
yeah, we'll have to vote
He can swear them in
next week.
next week, but I have their contracts if
Yeah, although-
council decides.
If council votes affirmatively, and affirmatively for Tracy especially, she's going to sit on Thursday
Yeah.
and Friday.
Pressure, Judge.
Judge, you and I will be back.
Okay.
There's always Judge Chris.
He said last week.
Oh, I got to send him a fruit basket. Okay.
Rebecca's doing it, I think.
No. Council, do you guys
I think, yeah.
need a 5-minute break?
I'll do your executive session on the fun thing.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Stand up, if nothing else.
Yeah, I'd like to.
screen down. Actually, I can put the screen.
Okay, we're going to get started. Okay. Council, hold on, Phil, hold on. Council, at break, I was informed that the judges are in the hallway and would like to know if it would be possible to make a decision on them yet. So I'm going to change the, excuse me? So I'm going to go ahead and change the agenda so that we can make an appointment of the associate judges, and then we'll go to the presentation on retail leakage. So I would need a motion.
Madam Chairman, I move to have the following individuals appointed as associate judges: Tracy Dawson, Ben Courier, and Steve Katzman.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Councilmember Stallman?
I had a couple questions on the contract form. Can we have we okay with a quick question on that?
Yep.
Okay. On City Manager Penny, I guess the question I've got is, we've got on section 2.0 talks about, it's the independent contractor language, and this goes back a number of years to where we were trying to make sure we had language in the contract that clearly identified that the judges are independent contractors, and this has to do with some IRS regs and so forth and so on. I guess my only question there is, has this been reviewed somewhat recently so that it's still in effect or it's still in force?
I believe so. I'm going to look at Kristen, but I'm pretty sure that we just reviewed and updated this contract.
Yes, this was reviewed both by the city attorney's office and Judge Feldman reviewed this contract, so.
Okay, and that's good, but given, let me ask it this way. This is somewhat of a sort of specialized area, and if you guys are comfortable that you've got the bases covered on, and I'm okay with it, I just want to make sure that we...
Ask the question. Yes.
Yeah, okay, all right.
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay. And then I guess the other question is far more mundane, but in Exhibit A, it says the contractor shall act as a municipal court judge. I don't know if we need to say relief or associate municipal court judge as opposed to presiding, because we have a presiding judge, do we need to say relief or associate, or does it matter?
I don't believe it does, because after our extensive discussion previously on the judge, our charter uses the word and code uses the word judge. So I think this is very fair. And then you can appoint a presiding.
As need be.
Yes, if there are more than one judge.
That's all I've got. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other discussion? The only discussion or comment I would have is that I was definitely impressed with this group, and they, even Ben, who has not served before, I think will be a great asset to the bench, and I feel really comfortable that Judge Feldman is building a really nice team. So it seems like a great bunch. Happy to approve. Okay, ready to vote? We'll do a roll call vote.
Mayor Brinkman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman?
Aye.
Councilmember Beckman?
Yes.
Councilmember Cernanik?
Aye.
Councilmember Cole?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Aye.
Councilmember Valdez?
Aye.
The motion carries 7-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move on then to agenda item 1C, or move back to 1C, presentation on retail leakage. And Denise? Yes.
Can you all hear me? I can't tell if this is
Yeah.
there. Okay. Sorry. one of the reasons that we came here tonight, thank you for taking time to hear us, is that we wanted to kind of take a look at what's going on with our major shopping centers. And when we're talking about retail saturation, what we're talking about is when we have more supply than demand. And when we're talking about leakage, we're talking about having more demand than supply. So what we did is we took our major shopping centers, which we'll show you pictures of each, and we took a look at, for the non-destination shopping centers, a 2-mile radius around that center point. And for our 2 destination centers, which would be downtown and Aspen Grove, we did a 5-mile analysis. And so we wanted to begin with giving you a little bit of an overview, and we have some documents to pass out to you over there, but it includes something that Rekha came across that is really worth reading, and it talks about a variety of things, but it's impacts on the retail market. So what's coming up for 2013 in terms of challenges are, of course, the economy, the challenges in the economy and e-commerce. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. But what they were noting is that areas where retailers are expanding is into Class A and Class B properties, with lots of activity in those two and not much in C. Retailers are looking for greater population densities and higher incomes, and they're not city-centric. They're going to look for a location that has what they're looking for within a 2 or a 3 or 5 mile radius. There's going to be expansions in the area of dining and entertainment. Luxury and discount retailers are doing strong. There's an actual bifurcation in the market right now that's going to show that the middle class is not spending as much money. So we need discount and we need luxury. The middle class purchasing is weak, and that is what's causing the decline of those middle class stores. Wireless stores that are driven by...
Causing the...
I'm sorry?
I didn't... Your last statement.
Since the middle class is being more conservative, not spending as much money, it's causing retailers that cater to the middle class to decline. Okay?
Thank you.
And wireless stores are coming up, but they're driven by new concepts, so they only succeed as new concepts come out. Expanding retailers, grocery stores, but the new smaller concepts. Discount to luxury, ethnic to organic. And the most interesting statistics is that restaurants are going to be 40% of all new tenancies in units, not square footage.
Is it tendency or tenancy?
Tendency.
Word or tendency?
Tendency. It's a trend, a tendency.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And mostly in fast food and fast casual. Miscellaneous expanding retailers, fitness, sporting goods, drugstores, dollar stores and thrift stores are really growing. Discounters, off-price apparel, pet supplies, hobby and arts.
Some tags.
Contracting industries, the larger grocery store formats, especially unionized or smaller regional chains. Video and video game stores, bookstores, DIY stores. They think they'll rally in 2014, though. Office supply and stationery and gift stores, shipping and postal, and some casual dining. I'm sure you all have seen a decline in these as you've been out and about yourself. Tendencies for shopping centers. Retail development still dominated by urban redevelopment, infill development. Malls and outlets, long-planned regional malls are moving forward, and there's some limited suburban development that's going on. Vacancy rates of 5% will increase to 6% by year-end. Lifestyle center vacancy rates are dropping. Can anybody figure? The reason, I think, is that you've got a number of different reasons for people to socialize at a lifestyle center. If they go to see a movie, they might have dinner, they might do some shopping, so they tend to do better. This is something I found.
Denise.
Real quick, could you further expand on what is meant by lifestyle center and put that in context to, would you see that as Aspen Grove or in downtown Littleton?
Aspen Grove.
And Aspen Grove was the first lifestyle center in Colorado.
And I think it's going to set a trend for what's going to be successful in the future. This is something that I found.
Denise.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I've got a number of questions on.
Well, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. I just want to cover a lot of ground. Do you mind if we just go through these slides real quick and we take
Okay.
questions at the end?
Okay.
I know you've been here a long
If we
time.
don't understand, we better ask while it's up there.
Okay. So, I'm sorry. Mayor, you had a question?
Go ahead.
It's all right.
No, that's fine, when we can go back later.
Okay. This came from the Local Institute for Self-Reliance. This is a nonprofit. This represents all of the services and tax revenues that come off of these types of developments. And they just wanted people to be aware of the fact that depending on your infrastructure contributions, that sometimes you can end up in a deficit when you're talking about shopping centers or big box stores. And they actually recommend that you concentrate a lot of your efforts on downtown Main Street developments because you've got less infrastructure requirements. They're walkable. There's just a lot of things that make them a better investment. This is just a general overall map of the shopping centers that we've covered now. This isn't all of our retail. We had to kind of confine this because of the number of shopping centers. But as you can see, there's a lot of stuff on the southwest side where we don't have any stores. And most cities like to ring their boundaries with stores because that allows them to draw customers from other jurisdictions in. So this is a list of the shopping centers that are included. And what we've got here for the total square footage is what comes from the assessor's office. Finding the available square footage that's for rent right now is challenging, but we basically found what we could. And so if you look, we have, with these shopping centers, a little over 2 million square feet available. And right now, we can't find any information on Broadway Estates or Centennial, but without those, we're still showing a vacancy of 306,914 square feet. So if you look at what we do in the sales tax department, we have two places that we can actually capture specific tax earnings. That's Aspen Grove and downtown. The rest of it is a larger zone. So if you take what we earned in sales tax from Aspen Grove in 2012 and you divide it by the total square footage, you come up with an amount of sales tax per square feet. And then if you take that and you subtract the amount of space that is vacant, you can see annually we're losing $246,000 in sales tax because of those vacancies. Same thing, you do the same calculation with downtown. Annually, with those vacancy rates, we're losing $126,000. This is the heart of figuring out where you have your saturation and your leakage. So this is, I have these reports for all the centers, but this is for Littleton at large. So if you look and you see green numbers, those are opportunities because you've got a greater demand than you have a supply. Where you have the red negative numbers, that's where you have saturation. You have too many service providers or product providers in that particular area. So this is just an example of what we've got citywide. So you can see on the right of the bar, these are the things, these are the opportunities. On the left, that's saturation. One of the things I want to make note of is that we've got a thing here called non-store retailers. And the reason they put that in there is that that is a constant competitor for bricks and mortar. And that's internet sales, that's kiosks, that's door-to-door telesales. That even includes some retailers where you can walk in, and if they don't have it in the store, then you can order it from their catalog. So it's just something to bear in mind that it is a constant competitor of bricks and mortar. This is just some more detail on some of the things that we may want to look at in terms of bringing more of these retailers into the city. Okay, so we started with going out and taking photographs of these, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with all of these, but this is Arapahoe Center on Lowell. As you can see, it's not a really beautiful center, and there's quite a few things that they could add to this center that might be improvements in terms of the demand for services. Aspen Grove, obviously, we're doing pretty well there, but if you look, we've got lots of opportunity there as well. Motor vehicle and parts dealers is about all that we're saturated in, so there's still plenty of room to add to that. Broadridge, a lot of improvements are being made there. Again, though, lots of opportunities to add other kinds of retailers. clothing and accessories, health and personal care is something I see through a lot of these.
So help me at least with this piece. With the non-store retailers on these places, how are we leaking?
Well,
I'm trying to understand the
okay,
concept.
if I,
Peggy, can you talk into your mic, please?
Sorry.
Thank
So I'm asking about the non-store retailers, when we see a shopping center, how is there leakage that way?
they're probably offering some things that I could buy, say, online, or that I might pick up at another shopping center with a preferable store. So, but non-store retailers is almost invariably online. So they may have something, but I don't want to go to this, maybe I don't like their parking lot or their ingress or their egress. I'm going to order it online.
Okay, so since we have non-store retailers on several of the shopping areas that are shown,
All of them.
are we getting duplication then?
No, it's all of them. It's a threat to all of them. That's why it's just,
No, but, so, I mean, if we got rid of the non-store retailers here, of that leakage, would it also disappear on all the
No.
others?
there's too much buying power in the virtual world. Like I say, I think that they have that there for everything because everybody from every bricks and mortar location is losing some of their business to the virtual world. So that's why it's always there. Just to point that out. Do you have another interpretation of it, Rekha? Because that's basically, it's going to always be a paramount threat to any bricks and mortar.
I have clarification also, please. So then, with that chart there, when we look at the motor vehicle parts and all that good stuff, so it's to the left.
That
So
means
it's saturated. But saturated means what to Brookridge, though?
it means that there's enough within a 2-mile radius of that particular location that they don't want to have any of it in their location. It means that there's more supply within a 2-mile radius of that location than there is demand.
So if it's to the opportunity that's within a 2-mile radius, it would fit at Broadridge?
Correct.
How come that's
Correct. But the thing to bear in mind is the trends in the retail market. So, for instance, if it says right there, we're leaking electronics and appliances, but the question of the success of an electronics store in the market today is not necessarily good. So if a property owner is looking for a good tenant here, they're going to weigh the national trends against what they're actually showing as an opportunity and pick something that fits the trends. So,
Thank you very much.
again, I'm just going through these. I wanted to bring you photographs to kind of give you a feel for what a lot of these look like. A lot of them are extremely outdated. And so, and we're calling into question the whole idea of how much grant money do we want to toss at this? I mean, is it enough to make a dent? Is it just furthering a dilemma of a declining shopping center? It's just an interesting question. Broadway Square, again, you've got...
I'm sorry, Denise, could you also just explain for the council, because the graphs at the bottom change ratios, and you might just point out the difference in ratios between the slides.
Okay, so you mean in terms of the leakage report?
The percentage impacts and what that actually means.
Actually, I'm having a hard time seeing it on here. For instance, the leakage for here on miscellaneous store retailers is -20. If you go here, miscellaneous store retailers, it's about the same level. So these two are sort of neck and neck in terms of that percentage of leakage. And it could be because of their similar tenants, that they have the same issues with oversaturation, and it could be the proximity to one another. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but Centennial, as you know, is the one up on Bellevue. This one's very problematic because there are 3 different owners of this property. So you can't really get vacancy information, and I think it is because of the multiple owners of it. And so we've got Denver Fabrics, which is kind of what's been there forever, but we've got issues with the standalone buildings that are blocking that back part. And now we've got the King Soopers that doesn't belong to us that's going to be blocking any view of that the other direction too. So in my opinion, this would be a great place to do a new mixed-use development. Columbine Square, as y'all know, the charter school is there, so there's a lot of available space, but there's actually more available space because the charter school is going elsewhere. Columbine Valley, again, it's a pretty substantial amount of vacant space. This shopping center has big problems with ingress and egress. If you're not headed the right direction, when you're on Bowles, it's almost impossible to get in there. So it's a lot of space, but it's hard to access. And then, of course, this is downtown. The interesting thing to me about downtown is it's showing there's lots of opportunity for food services and drinking places, and yet that's kind of where we all go to get dinner or lunch. But it's saying that there's still, within a 5-mile radius of the downtown area, opportunities for eating and drinking places.
You did 5 miles on downtown Littleton?
Yeah, the two that I did 5 miles on were downtown and Aspen Grove, just
Okay.
because I think more people would travel farther to get to those two destinations. Littleton Plaza, again, is, it's not a bad-looking place, but it's kind of a small place, and then there's a lot of things that, just the retail across the street is not necessarily an inviting thing. Littleton Square, there's quite a bit of available space, but it looks like King Soopers is going to occupy the largest open space that they have. This, again, challenge in ingress and egress. You kind of have to be going east on Littleton Boulevard to get in there. Once you're in there, it's kind of hard to figure out how you get out of it. What's on the corner, I think it's a gas station, that's a separate parcel, and it kind of blocks what you see inside of the shopping center. One thing to note is that about probably half of these, when I went out to try and do street views of them, because I wanted to get a feel for how you would find them, about half of them you couldn't find a decent street view, a Google Street View of them, which tells me something. That means that if I'm new to the area and I don't see it, and traffic isn't slowing down and there isn't a light, I'm probably not going to visit that shopping center. Oak Brook is another kind of empty wasteland. So it's a fairly big property, and now having a driver's license bureau there can be a good anchor. A lot of times when you've got discounted insurance, that's another good tenant. But look at the interesting thing. There's a clothing exchange there, but it looks like there's opportunity for clothing and clothing accessories. So either people are not going there for clothes, they're looking for a different kind of clothing store, or there's a lot of residents in that area that want to buy clothes. Platte Canyon, they've been working real hard on this. They're putting up a new sign, but again, it's an ingress-egress issue. You have to turn onto Platte Canyon to get in there. You can leave it on the north side, but it's challenging. And then the signage until what they're building now, you were going by there fast enough that you really wouldn't see what's in there. So all these things are pretty simple, but I don't think people think about it. They think about what they're going to put on the property, maximizing the available square footage, and it just doesn't work out very well. Oh, and by the way, this one is the one that has the gas station on the corner. And the disposition of that is still kind of in question. I know somebody's looking to buy it, but keep it as a gas station. They don't want to sell it to the owner of this shopping center. The best benefit would be if they acquired that property and were able to do something about visibility and add something to the center. Plaza Woodlawn, again, it's another smaller space, but that's a pretty heavy vacancy rate. Not real visible. If you look at the smaller picture with the trees, that's what you get from Street View. So if I'm traveling around Littleton looking for a space and I drive past here, I'm not even going to see what's in there. So they could mitigate that with some signage that would be along Littleton Boulevard. There are a lot of things that they could do. So, and then here's one of the better ones that we've got is Riverside Downs. And this one I think is really picking up some momentum. I don't know how often you go there, but it's a lot more people going to a lot of different places. So I think it's really picking up some steam. again, Shops at Riverbend. This is a really weird one to me because it's all restaurants. But if you look down here, again, there's some leakage of food services and drinking places, which I can only interpret as it's hard to find Riverbend. It's hard to access it. And so if I'm going north on Santa Fe, I probably won't see it. It has a Santa Fe address. If it had a Prince address, that would probably be better for them. The hotel is an impediment. So, you know, when you have something that is there and it is what it is, then you have to talk about how do we mitigate these issues. So right now we're working with the merchants and trying collaborative marketing and things like that. So South Broadway Car Care Center. There's not a whole lot you can do with a theme center because it's motor vehicle stuff. So even though they're leaking all these other things, they've got a theme going there. And not real bad vacancy either, so. Southbridge, that's kind of a wasteland at this point. Again, it is visibility, ingress and egress. You know, you kind of have to approach it from the mineral side. Safeway's a beautiful anchor. It's a really nice store, but there's some question about these larger grocery stores and how they'll sustain with the market changing, so.
Not expecting you to answer the question, but do they have any interest in, or are they getting some interest in the marshals?
You know, I honestly haven't had contact with them, so I can't say. Do you know, Rekha? Have you had any contact with them? So, those kinds of stores are doing well, though. The Marshalls type stores are doing well. So if most of these people have access to some pretty sophisticated data, so when they're looking at bringing in tenants, then they have access to information that will tell them what would be an ideal tenant in terms of these gaps. This is a really nice center, but it's totally invisible. This is your street view of it, you know, and if you're going fairly fast on County Line, you're not going to really notice it. Signage is not bad, but again, you have to think about the speed with which you're passing one of these. And this retaining wall is really pretty, but it sets the center up so high that you can't really see what's in there. So if you're just tooling around looking for some place to eat, you're going to actually have to pull in and hope you find what you're looking for. And Sunset Strip, everybody's kind of familiar with that, I'm sure. There's been a whole lot of issues with that. But basically, I think it's fairly well cleaned up at this point. Not a hugely great reputation for stuff that's in there. The market at South Park, again, pretty big vacancy rate. And this, again, they're on a busy street. It's really hard to get in there if you're just visiting. You know, it has to sort of become your destination for you to access it. Westview, it's really pretty, but again, you've got a lot of trees and fencing. I can't really tell what's in there, and I'm not that far away from it in this view. Now, Woodlawn is a really interesting thing because any of us who've been there would say, oh, it looks pretty tacky and we've got savers and all of that. But this is one of those discount synergies. You know, you've got Bimbo Bakery and you've got the thrift store and you've got savers and you've got all this other stuff. So, and some of these restaurants are pretty inexpensive, kind of quick in and out. So, and it's proximate to poor neighborhoods. So I think this one, without a whole lot of improvement, can probably sustain. It may not look like what we want, but I think it probably will do okay. Big issue for those that are on the eastern part of this, like the new Bimbo Bakery, they're totally invisible. In fact, you have to go all the way down on the side street and pull in to see that it's there. There's no signage. Rekha, have you noticed any signage on that? I haven't seen anything lately. So, again, it becomes a marketing issue. How do you become visible if physically you're set back and you're not visible? So that's basically it.
I've got a comment that probably will get somebody's hackles up. But when you talk about the trees are in the way, those are the trees that the city told them to plant. When you look at the open space, you say it's so far set back across a greenway or grass or whatever, that was probably a requirement of the planning at the time. And egress and any kind of traffic pattern, curb cuts, it went through a planning process and resulted in what it resulted in. It would seem to me that signage is mentioned several times, and that's the signage that the city expected them to put there. Regardless of any other private enterprise issues or market kinds of demands, I think the city needs to relook at those issues for these strip malls and make a decision, because we have set up a circumstance here that is not supporting the economy.
To tag onto that, Bruce, Aspen Grove, it's our biggest sales tax generator. You don't think there's any problems over there? There's huge problems. It turned 11 years old, and all those trees we made them plant are now so big that from Santa Fe, you have a very hard time telling what's in there. It's sunken down, right? It's below grade. And you look at how big that shopping center is. Do you see the signage that indicates it's Aspen Grove? Little neon signs on little, like, 2-foot-high planters as you drive in. And they complain about it continuously.
And yet they don't want to change their signage because the signage is reflective of a lifestyle center. So how
They would like to have some more visible signage off of Santa Fe besides the street name Aspen Grove. But it's what's there is being hidden. You've got an Apple store that you can't hardly see.
Yeah.
If I could just add on too, we met with some of the board members of the Highline business area down there, and they were very complimentary because they redid all their signs. You'll notice if you
They look good.
South Park.
Yeah, South Park and down in that area by Cub Foods, and then back going all the way over towards Social
Foods.
Security, or the old Cub Food Center.
Okay.
And they still call, you even hear call it the Cub area. And then back over toward, all the way over toward the Social Security offices, and then south of there. They were very complimentary of working with the city on getting that done. So, this is all doable, and there's, but I think we need to really, again, reemphasize whatever's in the interest of the community at this point seems to me to be the things that are going to make it viable.
And this, if I may jump in, Councilman Beckman, that's specifically why in part of the 2013 budget, we asked for the $50,000 to help with signage, landscaping, and facades, because a lot of this is old and the code has changed. Design standards have changed over the years. Design of the 1970s, how we thought people were going to shop, or the 80s obviously is changing. That's part of what you see in the mega malls shifting to lifestyle centers. They'll have a lifespan of their own, and then people won't want to shop there anymore, and they'll want some different style. But specifically, that $50,000 is going to do exactly what you just described relative to signage.
Peggy?
So I appreciate if like Aspen Grove and some others want to have some different signage, so they need to let us know. I mean, with Aspen Grove, I guess. People go to Aspen Grove in part because of the Apple Store. They know it's there. Every time I go in there, I have to wait 1,000,000 hours to get to talk to somebody because it's so darn busy. And I go in at some off times too. So, and at Woodlawn, Blueberries is busy a hell of a lot of the time because people know it's there. They go there, word spreads. Nana Bakery, which moved from downtown over to off of Broadway, apparently is doing very, very well there. People followed them there and then spread more word about them. So, some other kinds of things go on in the marketing. But I wanted to ask about the non-retailers, non-store retailers again. Are we not happy with non-store retailers? Are people paying their taxes, not paying the taxes on what they buy from non-store retailers?
Internet sales?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not.
Well, some are.
You might be.
So,
People don't. There's billions of dollars being lost.
well,
That's why the Marketplace Fairness Act
That's
is going
right.
through Congress right now.
Well, I know.
Thank God it's
but
going through.
I'm just trying to hear if that's what the issue is and how much we think we're losing because of that. Do we have an idea?
I don't know if we've calculated it out. The state, I think, had calculated out on a statewide basis, but I don't have that number off the top of my head. We can find out what it is, though,
Yeah,
and
if
make
it could
some
be really
and send it. I'm not
interesting.
sure what formula the state used to determine what that was, but if we can figure out what their formula was, we could try to pull out what we estimated Littleton could be. So, but we'll get that out to you guys.
Thank you.
Most virtual retailers will charge state sales tax. So the state of Colorado would know what's coming into them in terms of online purchases, and then you could extrapolate out how many of those purchases might belong to the city of Littleton and take the tax amount that we're not getting. And that would
That's
tell you.
if it's a store that's located in the state, right?
No, all of them charge state sales tax. I mean, I know I order from all over the country, and they always charge Colorado state tax.
I don't get charged from LL Bean.
Really?
I don't either.
At least I don't think I do. 'cause
We'll-
I-
we'll-
I
Some that
add it-
don't, that leave
I
you-
add it up and then I pay it.
We'll
myself.
check how the state calculated it and go from there.
Did you have another question?
Well, I was going to make a couple of comments, because you're going to get into what might be nice, but in taking a look at some of the stats, and this is just putting a finer comb to it, something like automobile sales. I mean, there's certain strips or parcels or collections or parks of where folks buy automobiles, and the saturation side that looks like that, I probably doesn't, I think, have a large enough radius around it to necessarily make that kind of valid. And I didn't know if there was ways to separate parts and services from the actual automobile sales, because parts and services are a different kind of retail
Yeah.
than someone buying a car.
That's actually more sales tax to us.
Right, and that's because wherever someone buys a car isn't, the tax goes to where their residence or
Right.
business might be for that. And so the question I would have on that is to kind of subset some of that. And then the second part, which maybe you're getting to, is the Buxton-like analysis, which says, what's the types of businesses where the demographics are attractive, that would say, this would be information for the property owners to say, here's the kind of tenant you might have
Yes.
some ability to attract.
Yes. And kind of along those lines, when anyone comes to the city and they're looking at rezoning their property or whatever, we do provide them with some information that would kind of truthfully lead them toward the conclusion that they might want to retain a commercial piece of that. So, and that kind of is a good segue to what Rekha's going to talk about, because there's a couple of things to bear in mind, that being proactive about retail attraction is a very complicated business. It has to do with what they're looking for, and you got to bear in mind that there are a lot of East Coast companies that don't want to come west of the Mississippi, a lot of West Coast companies that don't want to come over the mountains. It has a lot to do with proximity to distribution centers. So building relationships with people that work with retail developers and just trying to walk in cold to the ICSC or something like that, we would make no headway. So a big part of it is trying to do some analysis like what Rekha's doing. Who's out there? Who would be good in terms of what we can offer in demographics and footprints and things like that? Then trying to build a relationship with those people. So it's really kind of complicated, but I think we're getting a handle on it. So Rekha?
Denise, Bruce has a question.
Yes.
Well, I guess maybe a couple of questions, and there's a lot of information here. I guess I'm not sure there's outstanding alignment in my mind between maybe what you're going to talk about as far as some of these national retailers in our space. My sense is the space that you've got lined out here is pretty much C, maybe B space. You know,
That's correct.
we don't, other than Aspen Grove, and I don't even know if Aspen Grove is A space, but it might be. So the question is, you know, are any of the guys up on, you know, Whole Foods or so forth and so on, are they looking for the type of space that we have?
Probably not infill.
Yeah, and I think that's what I would agree with you on that. And therefore, the issue isn't so much, I guess we can serve as something of a clearinghouse, if that's where you're going with this, for landlords trying to fill vacant space, but predominantly the landlords for this type of space aren't cherry-picking tenants. They're basically taking the first tenant whose check clears.
That's correct.
The other thing you guys need, and you're probably aware of it, but I'll just mention it anyway, is the other component of all of this is, in a lot of these spaces, is what's referred to as CAM charges, or common area maintenance, which can be upwards of a third, again, to actually operate. So it's utilities, property taxes, repair and maintenance, insurance, and all this stuff gets passed on to the tenant. So, but it also, a lot of it, some of it, you know, certainly utilities, for example, to the extent that you've got a lot of vacant space, we don't get sales tax on utility consumption if people aren't consuming electricity and natural gas.
Right.
So there's your 200 and whatever was $40,000 worth of lost sales tax revenue is probably light in that regard. I guess one of the things I was going to ask, and this is just more of a wild hair. I remember having a conversation with Ron Rakowski at one meeting where Ron is the mayor of Greenwood Village, who most people you may or may not know. But anyway, he indicated they've got an arrangement with, I think it's Aurora and Denver, for what was sort of the old Tiffany Square area. And apparently, since it sort of borders all three communities, they put a fence around it and said, we'll just do a three-way split of the sales tax revenue that's generated from those areas that overlap each community. I don't know the specifics, I just remember the concept. But it struck me because that whole Broadway or Bellevue and Federal area sort of smells similar. I don't know if you guys have considered or chatted, or if it would make sense with that Englewood King Soopers going in, if there were a way to put all of that into a, ring fence the whole thing. I don't know if it would be incrementally both communities getting more sales tax by sharing versus us just getting what we get from the Home Depot, for example, and them getting what they get from King Soopers. I don't know. I thought it was an interesting parallel based on what Greenwood is doing with the other two.
Well, and I think that's a really interesting idea. And this is sort of an apples to oranges comparison, because the shopping centers are just as you define them. They're not cherry picking. They're probably not the kinds of spaces that these more ideal retailers are looking for. But I wanted you to take a look at those centers to kind of think about what alternatives there might be. I mean, there's only so much we can do to influence property that is privately held, but ideas like you're talking about could certainly be investigated. But the other piece of it is, with the vacant land that we do still have, what kinds of things might look good there, might be a good match for the demographics. So unless you have other questions, I might just go ahead and segue to Rekha here, because she's
I'd like just to comment, Bruce, to your Gary and Sears and I are both familiar with sales tax sharing agreements, and he likes to bring up Lowe's. So we burned bridges pretty heavily on that one, because we put the parking lot in Englewood and we kept the cash registers all in Littleton, and we did not share, and they specifically brought that up. So it will be an uphill battle to tread on that. But he and I have definitely discussed it, and I think if there's ultimately a regional approach, we missed an opportunity, I think, when that King Soopers was being redeveloped and the conversations was there to really look at what could we do more comprehensively, holistically in that whole area. But we weren't in the mode that the council is now in terms of more proactive engagement in that. But we actually just talked about it again today. So it's been an ongoing conversation between Gary and I. and will continue to be.
I have a question about that one. A grocery store is mainly non-taxed stuff, right?
In Littleton.
Not Englewood.
Englewood does not charge tax on groceries.
I don't think we even had a plug-in here, so.
We
But
don't.
they do.
We don't charge on groceries,
No, we don't.
Let's assume she's right. I think you
right? Yeah, so we don't charge on groceries, but we sure to devil do charge at Home Depot. So why would we want to do any sharing?
Yeah, if
I
that's the
mean,
case, then we wouldn't. I thought Englewood had a sales tax on groceries.
Okay.
They don't, and that's why they're surprised at what's happening at the King Soopers that they have at University in Hamden.
Okay.
The context is more about it's the Lowe's example. If you're going to have an impact that a neighboring jurisdiction has to pay for the roadway system or something like that, is there an opportunity? Or if we had a master design for that entire area, it might make sense to collectively pool those revenues, because there are streets in Englewood, there are streets in Littleton. You don't typically do it on a building by building basis. You look at it holistically. And again, we're continuing to talk, and we'll see where it goes over time as developments occur on our borders.
So can I ask a question of Denise? So you have the mileage, the radius from certain places.
Yes.
But can you can you get data on, let's say, who's coming from outside the city into the city?
Do you know if that's possible? Sorry, I didn't hear the question. She wondered if it's possible to get information on who is coming from outside the city into the city to purchase stuff.
The retailers are collecting it, it's whether they share it or not.
Yeah, I've asked Aspen Grove for it before, and they won't share it.
I didn't think you
Yeah.
would.
Probably the best we could do would be to use some of our ESRI demographic data, and, just kind of, it would be more general, but sort of, in Highlands Ranch, for example, the demographics are, families with children who earn $70,000 a year and have these kinds of interests and spend this kind of money. So it would be kind of an aggregate type of data that might be available.
So, Michael, that company that I put in touch with you from CML last year, I thought they could do that kind of study. But I'm forgetting the name of them, and I'm sure they'll be there again this year.
There are firms that will do intercept studies and different things like that, but it's costly and it's general in nature depending upon the type of business. And if you're looking at an Aspen Grove type of thing and doing intercept studies and making assumptions using probably a lot of the same data that we have, if there was really a desire, I guess we'd want to drill down on what are we going to do with that data.
Really for the businesses to get that.
Yeah, but you certainly can.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, the chart that Denise just handed out is really for discussion purposes. It's an example of information that might be helpful to know about specific retailers, and it's really just kind of a dart on the board as a starting point for discussion. So, I've got
Oh, you got the lapel? Okay, sorry.
That's okay. Is that better?
You're good.
Okay. Again, these can all be changed up or expanded or contracted according to any direction you might want to take it. But just for an example and a starting point, there are some selected retailers here. And those have been, again, as kind of an artificial organizational scheme, have been grouped according to the type of retail. So sports, entertainment, fashion and home, grocery, food, and discounters. And a couple of examples from each category. And then the columns, just give different types of information that might be helpful for a property owner or developer to know. So what is the footprint that particular retailer needs? What are the demographics that they like to locate in? Is there a contact person? Do they have a realtor that they work with? And any additional comments? Okay, so basically that's it. It's just a starting point to kind of show you an example of a quick reference sheet, if you will, that can be provided. And you could choose specific retailers that you're interested in, and particular types of information that you think would be helpful for developers.
One of the things that I think might be hopefully helpful, but clearly informational, is because we really cannot operate just as 13 and a half square miles of Littleton, because we've seen what happened when Streets of South Glen went in. And Aspen Grove just lost 2 more of their retailers to Streets of South Glen. And so we know that there's an impact when you have something like that happen. We know there's an impact when Town Center up in Highlands Ranch puts in huge anchors and then fills the sides with the smaller strip mall type of businesses. They've got their, restaurants, bars, that type of thing that are filling in over there too. So part of it is not just looking at, I would think, not just looking at what it is that Littleton is missing, or that Littleton, but what's happening on our periphery, what's happening there, because oftentimes people don't really recognize when they're, except for the name can be clarity, like South Glen Mall, but when they're shopping in another place. And so they're going for the merchandise. So knowing, I think, kind of what's around, the good thing is we don't have really too much competition on the west side.
Sorry.
Because we have the river, and,
You get to South Lake Plaza.
well, yeah.
Just too far
Yeah,
away.
yeah, exactly.
residential.
Yeah. And then there's probably some into Inglewood, although they don't have a lot of heavy business there. And I think, so it would be interesting, I think maybe just Highlands Ranch and Centennial are probably our biggest punches.
Yeah, we're not in a vacuum, that's for sure.
Well, part of it is, too, that when business is looking to locate here, they're looking for, or locate anywhere, they're looking for what, not putting things too close, not putting too many grocery stores too close, not cannibalizing from themselves. Now, oftentimes, Burger King and a McDonald's live very happily next to each other, but other things don't. So I think that type of information would be helpful, just understanding what's going on around us, too.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I kind of went through the chart very
Okay.
broadly, and don't know if there's anything else, but I covered what I thought.
Okay, great. No other questions? Okay. Okay.
Actually.
Oh,
Well, I've got
Bruce.
a general, I guess, it's not so much a question, I think it's good background information, and there's, as you said, there's a lot of ancillary factors that impact all of this. I guess maybe what I'd be interested in sort of getting some additional information on is based on the information that staff has collected in this venue, how does it integrate with what the think tank was presenting, what Tom Wooten presented last week? And is there a set of action plans that would be in development about, you know, okay, we distilled all of Wooten's information, and we distilled all of the information, and we think, here's 3 projects we should look at that would address the intersection of both, that would be doable in some short, you know, time frame.
So what this is intended to be is more additional data in conjunction with the economic plan. So we're going to have you guys adopt that. You guys will do whatever you want with it. And then we can focus on some, the answer to your question is yes. I would say that there's probably, we're not just picking one because if a developer or a landlord says, I've got something going on in a particular parcel or a particular shopping center, rather, we're going to go work with them on that. So we're doing, I think there's 20-something, so we're doing it kind of all collectively under the umbrella of the economic plan that once you guys put that together, and it's not unmanageable for us to be able to work with all of them. And what we're doing is fine-tuning within each one of those shopping centers and saying what are the appropriate businesses that might go in here, and how do we work with the property owner or the landlord to try to fill those businesses in a much more proactive manner than what we've done in the past. But the first thing that we actually need, so this is just data kind of giving you our thought about what the methodology and how we're going about thinking about it. And what we really need is the green light under the economic plan directing us to say, yes, we want you to do this. I mean, to an extent, we're already doing it, but we really need it validated through the council and adoption of that document.
And I think that's wholly appropriate. I guess I'm you know, in any of these types of projects, I don't know, doing 20 simultaneously.
But realize it's not, I mean, as Denise pointed out, these are private properties. And so what it is going in and looking at Broadridge as an example and looking at where the leakage is, and then sitting down with the developer, with the property owner, and saying, here's the types of businesses. Are there some ones that you've been contacted? We can do some outreach to you, you know, and that's a meeting and some follow-up work.
No, I think that's right, because ultimately if we could get a few quick successes on something like that where somebody could come in, then there's momentum, and B, that you can communicate to the rest of the business community and the retailer space, landlords, that, you know, hey, we've got a track record of success, and we're able to, it's a little bit like the whole Paul Washington thing. I mean, if you got the 7 pillars, you've got things happening in different venues that all sort of point to a goal or an objective. And I think we're still sort of coalescing a lot of this.
Well, staff is, I mean, our goal is to fill the retail spaces and get that vacant space occupied. And that's what these guys are doing on a daily basis, is talking to those businesses and talking to folks who are interested, or we want to be interested, to come to the community. So
but we still have to have skin in the game. I mean, do we have to have skin in the game other than you guys can make phone calls and match up?
Well, to the extent that we have, we've got a grant program that we can put on the table. We have streamlined tenant finish pieces. So part of it is us saying we're open for business, and then here's how we help them get from, yes, here's the type of space we're looking for, to actually a signed lease and then in there, and how can we make that process as painless from the plan review, the government side of it, and get them in and started. And to the extent that we start looking at, I mean, should the council approve that economic plan, we've got a whole list of things that we want to say, here's what our to-do list is now going to be on a more official basis.
Okay.
Because things like looking at sales tax share backs, those are occurring right now. None of them have actually come to you yet, but they will be before too long. But moving into more of the larger urban renewal, looking at some plans for urban renewal authorities, using TIFs on some of the larger area redevelopment subdivisions, we really need that plan. We're thinking about it, and I guarantee Denise and I have a long to-do list once you guys say yes.
And that's great. No, and I think that it's helpful information. To the extent that either a landlord or a prospective tenant comes in and says, you know what, we like Broadridge for the sake of an argument, but we really would like to see a different ingress or egress kind of configuration, or we need some new infrastructure? I mean, is that something we're waiting for
Nope.
the private side to come up and say, we need
Well-
this, or are we suggesting to them that if you guys are interested, we see this as an issue and we think it could be addressed?
Yes, it's both. I mean, it depends upon the scope. If we're just talking about a tenant finish, no, there's no conversation. If we're talking about a major demo and remodel, which we don't have a lot of those going on, then it's Public Works going in along with planning and saying, we'd like to see the parking lot redesigned. You need to come up to the landscape standards of the new parking lot or whatever that is. So we're doing everything on every conversation that we can have without sounding too global in that, because we're not just focusing in on, oh, you want this particular thing. We're thinking, we as the collective staff in Economic Development, Land Use, and Public Works are looking at it comprehensively and saying, what can we do based upon the project that they're proposing? And it varies. Unfortunately, most of them are tenant finishes right now because we don't have those large redevelopment projects occurring. But those that we have talked to, absolutely, we want to see parking lots redone. We want to see, the facades of the buildings. Yeah.
Okay.
Improved drainage and all that.
Jerry?
If you could, the Planning Commission years ago got very similar information. It was really helpful. If you could make sure the Planning Board gets, I think the presentation that Denise did was
Okay.
excellent information.
Absolutely. Yep.
If you can understand it, I think it's really good. I think the folks on the Planning Board.
We could even talk to Glenn about getting the presentation to the Planning Board.
Cool, thanks.
Bill?
From, if I'm not too far off, just following on what Bruce was talking about is, at least I think our experience over, at least what I've been around for the last several years, is between property managers and property owners, there's mixed levels of interest, and trying to work with those that have some vision for their property is going to be a whole lot easier in that. But also, I think we saw some benefit in actually helping the property managers know what is available for a business. And I think having some of those discussions, if I'm not too far off, I don't know whether Denise can comment on it, is actually finding those property owners that are looking for some of that information. But then, as Paul Washington was talking about, finding out when folks and their leases are up and when there's something that might be at risk, and what could be done to maybe help or hurt or help argue on some of those points, so that there's several things that need to happen. One is, yes, there's sales tax, but we also want to see jobs and people that are in those spaces. That some of that came up this morning. So,
Bruce?
Similar to what Phil just said, but I take a little different perspective. There's a life cycle to these malls. Something that initially was set up with, let's say, 10 tenants, with 9 or 10 of them in a retail sales mode, turns eventually through the trend down to where 3 or 4 of them are in a retail sales mode, and the remaining are at a service type insurance company, beautician, barbershop, veterinarian, and then we're not. So back to the sales tax issue. I appreciate that there's a job there, but there's a life cycle. And each of these malls has their own life cycle because they're wherever they happen to be in it. And we need to get ahead of that in this discussion, understand where that mall's at, because from the property owner or manager point of view, it's still a rent check. They're getting 10 times one rent check, and they don't care whether it's a service or, that's just not in their purview. Can you raise the value of the center, raise the value of the rent check? That matters. And if it's truly a dying center and we can get ahead of that, make that point, I think we're farther ahead in accomplishing our goal.
Yep. And we have made that specific. I'm speaking for Denise, but this is what she spends her days doing, is sitting down and saying, if you see, take a hypothetical, because I don't want to give a specific example that's not matured yet, but if you've got one of these areas and you've got the anchor retailer that's looking at redeveloping, we're not just talking to them, we're also talking to that property management or the owner, saying, this is a good thing in a three-way partnership with you helping that redevelopment occur, because if you've got another strip of 10 spaces and that redevelops, you're going to see that per square foot go up, and you may be able to move from a lower-end insurance company to go back to a Quiznos or a Subway or some whatever it might be, so they can help, so they can hear from us saying, oh, there's a benefit to them as the property owner or property manager as well. So we're keenly aware of all of that.
Barry?
Bruce, you're absolutely right. It was about 12, 14 years ago when the Planning Commission was talking about Aspen Grove. That was a brand new thing. Now it's Aspen Grove is built 10, 12 years, 10, 11 years, I guess.
It'll be, November will be 12 years.
12 years. Now we're already talking about it being an old center. 10 years from now, South Glen is going to be an old shopping center. I don't like the idea of getting on the trendy stuff. Just like all these old shopping strips that we have were trendy. What is unique about Littleton is that it's unique. And if that's what our charm is, then we need to really work on that, I think, instead of the trend.
One of the things, I was just incredibly impressed with Denver's approach to economic development, because they have such a bigger cat to skin. I mean, they're talking international, and they're competing against LA and Chicago, and they're really serving. They really are serving a region. It's not just, they don't just serve within the boundaries. And so the approach that they did with their 7 pillars, I keep going back to it as a touch point on what we're looking at with economic development. And I just pulled up their business recruitment pillar, and quite honestly, it's pretty impressive how we're pretty point on with where they're at with stuff too. And one of the things that Denise hasn't shared, I think Michael's indicated it a couple times to council, is that they're putting together a website specifically for the businesses, and for businesses to communicate with each other, and for us to communicate with businesses, and for businesses looking to come in to do that. And that's a huge thing of the marketing effort that for business recruitment. Because what it is it's about supplying the information. They're out there looking. We don't know where they all are. There's zillions of businesses out there looking for places to locate, or a place to expand, and we don't know what they're thinking. We don't, but they're out there Googling and checking and that type of thing. And what was interesting was, I thought when Denise said that she looked at the Google Maps and you couldn't even see it, and I thought, well, my gosh, what if you Googled, if you Googled us, what would you find at this point? What would come up for Littleton? And I think that Google image is definitely shifting and changing, and we're providing that level of information and showing that we're sitting here ready and willing and able. And I also think that one of the things that they have done is that they're doing a retail study, and they're working with DRSAC. That's got to be, what is that? DRSAC? No, it's a collaboration with DRSAC Development and implementing a strategy for ROPA's retail development. And I think that might be something that might be something we could consider, is to what are we really, I think that your leakage and your saturation was interesting, but it doesn't really, it kind of goes point by point around the community. What do we have to offer for what are we missing, and what would be advantageous? I mean, chasing down the wrong stuff is just spinning our wheels and wasting time and looking foolish. And also sending out, what should we look like to the people who we want to attract? So maybe some thinking on that, which you're probably ahead of me on that, Denise. But I think that being strategic about that is important, because we don't want to be just sitting here and, okay, any random that wants to pop up, because there are higher qualities of retail than others. There are longer lasting levels of retail than others. There's retail that doesn't have that leakage with the internet. And that's the kind of stuff that I'd rather see us looking at than just let's fill up these empty vacant spaces. The other part of that is, and I think Phil touched on it about when these leases are up, one of the huge problems I've been hearing is that their landlords are raising the rents to the point where people cannot stay in there. They're leaving. That's why Marshall's left, because they couldn't justify the increase in rent based on the traffic, and they got an offer at Park Meadows next to Nordstrom Rack where they were going to be paying less and had astronomically more car traffic, foot traffic, etc. So that's kind of a battle. We see that somewhat down on Main Street also, where you get people having to move because rents were raised and other people, struggling. It's private property. They can charge what they want to for their rents. I'm not talking about going in and trying to manage that stuff. But how do we, one of the things that we are talking about in the South Platte Working Group is these properties along the river, which are primarily Inglewood and Sheridan, where they're reluctant sellers. They just don't want the car crusher and stuff like that. And they don't see, they're fine, leave us alone. You go build your trees and trails, leave us alone. But they're a huge part of making that connectivity. So in some ways, it's the same type of thing where the way we're going to deal with those people is to say, just keep going on around them and seeing what happens and seeing how that's improving and increasing the value and making things better and more viable and more attractive. And maybe it's some of that same thing. You look at the Safeway shopping center over there, and that parking lot is massive for the amount of retail in there. I mean, at some point, even a looking at that differently, and then, I don't know, I'm talking too much. But I just think that those are some of the things where we're kind of getting to those points with this, is that we can, well, like what Tom said, we can design our own future. We don't have to sit here and take the first Taco Bell that runs through. Peggy?
So is it possible to take some of these huge parking areas, as in the one with the Safeway is, on Broadway, well, on Mineral, and have a residential, multi-family residential as part of that? Part of what I'm thinking there is the proximity to the healthcare facilities, which is good for people who don't have, don't want to have their own transportation. I mean, own their car, whatever. But they'd be able to go to grocery stores. They'd be able to go right across the street, hopefully fairly easy, to the medical facilities, to the doctors' complexes that are over there. Some things that are in the South Park that are also medical related. Is that something that we could do?
I mean, in theory, yes. I'm not sure what the land uses allow in there, and I'm not sure that the property owner would be interested in that.
Well, if it's going to bring them more business, I mean, that's what I'm looking at. We're talking about jamming stuff downtown. Everybody wants us, not everybody, some people want us to jam as much as we can downtown, but we've got other places that if we wouldn't really be jamming, and we have these big empty parking lots sitting there.
Yeah, I'm not sure you'd put an equal sign between all that, but that's probably a different conversation in terms of overall land uses, because the amount of parking that's necessary in those other areas and our parking code requirements are probably going to limit that, because when that shopping center was developed, the amount of parking spaces they put in was probably what, to our earlier conversation on the trees, is what the city told them to put in at that point.
Yeah,
So,
but maybe we need to revisit some of that.
No, I
Debbie
hear you.
mentioned the other day the need for more patio homes for seniors, and I'm thinking, okay, you have more patio homes for seniors someplace, also near where they can buy their groceries and go to the doctors and so forth.
it's not, yes.
But anyway, I'd like us to just have some discussion about what we might do in that regard. I mean, what we might do, what we theoretically could do would take some changes, or maybe people don't want to do it. I don't know.
Okay, council, anything else on this? Okay, then we have an exec. Bruce?
I move that council go into an executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute, Section 24-6-402, Sub 4, Sub B, for the purpose of receiving legal advice regarding pending litigation to discuss the Canamart and the Matuzek cases, and present in the exec session will be all of City Council, City Manager Penny, and Deputy City Attorney Sladorn.
We need a second.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ready to vote? Roll call.
Mayor Brinkman,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stallman,
Aye.
Councilmember Beckman,
Aye.
Councilmember Cole,
Aye.
Councilmember Taylor,
Yes.
Councilmember Sunanik,
Aye.
Councilmember Valdez.
Okay, we
The
will.
motion carries 7-0.
Okay, we will not return to this room. We will not be returning to this room after the exec.